So, ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Adams.
You may be familiar with some of my art as a practicing artist. You may not think me much of a traditionalist. I think that you'll find that some of your concerns and your values will be reflected in this speech. Since you may not closely follow the situation in the arts, I shall outline 4 chief problems and 6 areas that require solutions. This will apply to dissenting artists working in traditional and non-traditional styles. Before I discuss the problems, here are a few natural advantages traditionalists have. Traditional artists have some outlets that non-traditional artists don't. For example, the portrait painter and the painter of horses, houses and pets can make, with a steady income and word of mouth, a reasonable income from private commissions. Whereas the conceptual or the performance artist requires some degree of non-commercial funding. You'll never have heard the names of these portrait painters, and their art will never enter a national museum or probably even a regional museum. But they have therefore a degree of isolation and protection from the institutions which are now citadels of progressivism. If their professional societies can be preserved from activists, they have roots for honours, advocacy and commerce. They have skills that they can pass on potentially to paying students. They are less subject to fashion than big-name artists are. I shan't detain you by listing instances of woke takeover of cultures, of our institutions of culture, the chronic mismanagement of organisations on the basis of progressive values, subversion of museums, or any of the manifold indignities visited upon the public fine arts in Britain. Every day as an art critic I receive reports and press releases that confirm the instrumentalisation of the public arts along left-wing lines using minority quotas. Almost every significant centre of artistic presentation and funding has been captured and repurposed towards social justice. If you would like to read about that, I direct you to my pamphlet, Abolish the Arts Council. Copies are available through me here. Here is a general assessment of the situation comprising of 6 points. Number 1, institutional hostility. In short, museums and public art venues are now hostile territory for counter-establishment artists. Art administration staff nationwide see themselves as social activists, using public venues and resources to enforce anti-traditional, anti-Western, anti-hierarchical, decolonialist agendas. Museums, art venues, cooperative spaces, arts councils, local councils, national government and NGO funding organisations operate in lockstep to deny opportunities to political dissidents and even traditionalists. You may think that painting a landscape is non-political. Well, there are plenty of people in the arts administration who will tell you otherwise. They'll tell you it's an explicitly political act. And in a way, I do kind of agree with them. This closes off routes that many artists could otherwise have followed. Indeed, my conventional career was cut short in 2016 when I started to publish articles that criticised progressivism, feminism, and quota programming. Such hostility has not only curtailed careers, it has deterred potential artists from entering the field. To explain what the situation is inside the arts administration, let me outline the character of the Museums Association, founded in 1889 to provide technical and ethical guidance to staff of museums. So, the keen-eyed of you will see that at its annual conference last year, the Museums Association held a panel with 6 Muslim women involved in the museum world, 4 of them wearing hijabs. Above them was a photograph of a group of men associated with the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery in Glasgow, photographed sometime in the 20s or 30s, and beside it runs the legend, "I don't see myself here." Well, no surprise. The title of the conference was Make Change Happen, brothers and sisters. Its topics were museums for climate justice, creating an anti-racist country, practical lessons from Welsh museums, and collaborating for change, disrupting narratives of racist science. There you go. The MA, the Museums Association, encourages museums to deaccession objects seen as problematic. It supports staff to queer heritage sites and historical collections. The 2022 conference held a workshop entitled Dismantling White Supremacy in Museums, led by Zandra Yeaman, curator of discomfort. Yes, you heard that correctly. Curator of discomfort at the Hunterian Museum of Glasgow University. Dr. Yeaman explained her role as, quote, exploring white supremacy as an economic and cultural system in which white Western ideals control the power of the text, the material resources, and the ideas of cultural superiority, unquote. Discomfort is the academic version of no white comfort. It challenges all fixed social conventions and advances progressive change by destabilizing the worldviews of individuals and institutions. With a body like the MA overseeing venue staff and the Department of Culture locked into legislation such as the Equalities Act of 2010, any conservatives within arts organisations are either silent or incapable of action. Any conservative or reactionary artist applying for exhibition or project funding faces a foregone conclusion, which is outright rejection. Number 2, the press. Mainstream press outlets are not so much sceptical or negative regarding counter-establishment art, they simply don't encounter it, and they have little space to discuss or review it, even if they were to recognise its significance. The specialist art press is predominantly hostile to dissenters. The best one can do is the jackdaw. And a handful of art blogs. Due to the limited circulation or reach of these outlets, potentially supportive artists don't have knowledge of their colleagues' achievements and ideas. It also means that artists have limited opportunity to reach their colleagues and also to reach outside to the general audience. I've previously given speeches urging people to back ideologically supportive print publications such as the Jackdaw, the Mallard, Bournebrook Magazine and Salisbury Review. It would be a shame and a tactical loss and a tactical lapse to allow these publications to fold due to apathy. Maybe a portable mic? Oh, it's working. It
should be working.
Yeah. So it's better to keep these publications alive, to reinvigorate them, or to find, I don't want to say potential targets, but opportunities within established print outlets and introduce more sympathetic writers or a more aligned editor, and to help move those over towards our side. I should mention here IM 1776 as a successful, newly launched cultural periodical. The social media network, the website and the print publication are the connective tissue of a movement. They signal what ideas are most important, what the areas of action should be, and who the men to back are. In any serious cultural movement, network systems should let people know who the high achievers are, who the pioneers, and whom the rising generation. In crude terms, they inform potential supporters who they should know, whose art they should buy, who is worth reading, and so forth. In the same way that people who are part of religious faiths pay a tithe to the church or to designated charities, people who have political beliefs should back counter-establishment channels of discussion and journals of record, such as these. This should come as second nature to us. I don't know why I even mentioned this, but... Number 3, lack of teaching opportunities. One of the least appreciated aspects of the life of the professional artist is the importance of regular income. artists rely on income outside of selling art because their art income is both very low. Most artists earn less than the cost of their materials per year, and it is very irregular. Most of them, if they were living off their income, would be living below the poverty line. Therefore, earning money by running courses and teaching, either piecemeal or salaried in higher education, is important. Had art schools remained separate from the rest of the higher educational network in the 70s and 80s, then there would have been some built-in resilience. Unfortunately, art schools became first accredited to and then incorporated into first polytechnics, then universities. This means that art departments are staffed by individuals who are indistinguishable from the general university staff, and therefore hostile to any potential teacher who is not politically aligned or is demographically unsuitable. This removal of a staple of income makes being an artist, especially supporting a family, less viable. It removes from the profession dissenting artists who would produce art of little commercial potential. 4. Cleavage between meritorious art and state art. There is a philosophical issue here raised. In the past, artists became members of a guild, completed their apprenticeships, and graduated from academies due to competence. We live in an era when success measured in terms of honours and income is detached from competence. This is no accident. This is a deliberate separation of artistic competence and the patronage of the state. The state requires art that embodies its values, or more often, artists who embody its values, usually through a demographic ideal. The woman, the ethnic minority, the religious minority, the sexual minority, the immigrant, and so on. The deadening effect of, on one side, meritorious art, and on the other side, state patronage and official honours, the separation between them, is not lost on artists who wish to make art in a traditional vein. They may aspire to have not just a reasonable income from private collectors, but also public respect in the form of prizes, honours, museum acquisitions, and high-profile exhibitions and publications. These are now out of the reach of deserving artists today. It's natural that today's artist responds to these thwarted expectations with not just anger or bitterness, but actually turning away from the profession. When state funding and endorsement are at stake, merit is of no consideration. This demoralisation of artists is something equivalent to the spurning of Christianity in the aggressively secularisation of society. It is resentment against the divine function of art and the necessity of transcendental beauty. The spurning of beauty is a malicious spite of the less gifted, less moral, and less noble against what they despise. When I think of this, I recall Yukio Mishima's novel, The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, based on a true story. In the novel, the protagonist, Mizoguchi, a crippled, lonely misfit who is the son of a priest charged with preserving and honouring an outstanding temple. Mizoguchi comes to resent his father's veneration of the beauty of the temple, which had miraculously survived the bombing of World War II. Mishima describes Mizoguchi's mentality, quotes, "Beauty is like a decayed tooth. It rubs against one's tongue. It hangs there, hurting one, insisting on its own existence. Finally, it gets so that one cannot stand the pain, and one goes to the dentist to have the tooth extracted," unquote. Mizoguchi gains revenge against beauty by burning down the temple. When you are surrounded by beauty that you yourself cannot master, and you nurture overweening self-regard and fear no damnation, you salve your indignant ego by destroying, as we saw during the 2020 riots. The state, certainly at local government level, within police command centres, and later within the judiciary, was clearly on the side of those who hate beauty and resent history. We come to an issue that must be addressed. For many of you, recognising an object as a faithful iteration of what you consider as legitimate and authentic art instructs you as to what sort of art we should support. Artists such as Wyndham Lewis showed that art could be modernist and yet reject the bromides of the democratic, the egalitarian, and the historical or historicist. Indeed, Lewis's vorticist movement was defiantly elitist and vanguard. As thinkers such as Jonathan Bowden have previously explained. I'll take the liberty of quoting Bowden here. Quote, "One cares nothing for the aesthetic standards of the masses. They are children who only like what they know or feel comfortable with. What really matters has to be the ecstasy of becoming. Early or classic modernism happened to be exactly that. It was an attack on sentimentality. It proved to be art purely for intellectuals. It was anti-humanist, elitist, inegalitarian, vanguardist, misanthropic, sexist, racist, and homophobic. All good things." Quote. Applauding the shade of Jonathan Bowden, who watches over us. Bowden goes on to explain Lewis's reactionary credentials as an artist. Quote, "One thing you have to remember is that Lewis was pathologically anti-bourgeois, and he was totally opposed to what he would have regarded as the culture of sentimentality. He's a right-winger, but he's not really a conservative at all. He's a revolutionary right-winger. The mediocrity of the majority of people, their total absence of taste. He wants to shake them by the throat. It's a very aggressive form of culture," unquote. Your responses to Bowden's position on this will differ according to whether you are a conservative or a reactionary. Accepting reactionary art as a valid assault on complacency and sentimentality, I think to be necessary. Regardless of whether you personally respond to modernist art, excluding art that is unconventional does not seem feasible. I'm thinking here of classic modernism of the middle of the last century, not the outer reaches of conceptual or performance art. I don't back those. Although, as a destabilizing force, you can see the power of memes, if you're on the internet, that this is a very effective way of tackling the mainstream and destabilizing accepted wisdom, of speaking truth about things that are patently absurd, things that we know. So this is the power of memes. It's just slightly outside of my talk. I don't say that you should visit exhibitions of art not to your taste, any more than I would sit down to listen to an entire Baroque opera. But I say that you should not oppose or try to defund excellent cultural material that is politically sympathetic solely on the grounds of your aesthetic taste. Consider the writings of Ezra Pound and the young T.S. Eliot, which were explicitly non-traditional in form, yet they expressed abiding affiliation to core civilizational ideals. It is defensible and reasonable to hold that traditional values are best expressed through traditional forms. I don't disagree with you there. But there is a possibility of progressive ideas entering through radical new forms. This is always a danger. But consider the proposition that all the traditional forms that you honour were once modern. They were new forms that developed from pre-existing older forms. Sometimes when I speak about architecture, for example, and I ask people what their ideal is, a lot of them will speak about Paris, the old buildings of Paris. When they talk about the old buildings of Paris, they're talking about the buildings that were devised by Haussmann in the late 19th century, in the mid-19th century. They're not actually talking about medieval Paris, which has all gone. What they're doing is they're talking about buildings which were considered modern, that were built from pre-made features. You had pre-made plans for exteriors, interiors, for fittings. A lot of these came from factories on the outskirts of Paris, and they were brought in. You could buy them off plan. So those boulevards that you so admire and you wish that we could perhaps emulate, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, they were considered modernist. They were built to plans, they were built with pre-made aspects, and it was all centrally planned. So your idea of tradition may not extend back as far as you think. Not that that makes them bad buildings, of course. I've spent over a decade warning that if the artistic programme of the counter-establishment is A, overly narrow, and B, overly conservative, perhaps a contentious statement here, but we will frighten off politically sympathetic, talented creators, commentators, and collectors. We are not looking to be a big tent group, welcoming anyone who fancies joining. Yes, that's true, but we cannot command or entice the very best of current generations by promising them only what already exists. For, in that case, what will they make? Will they be relegated to imitating the past, doing nothing of note themselves? Where is the prize of immortal glory for someone who is destined to be the new Pugin, Ruskin, or Grinling Gibbons? That is, being damned at the very best to being a first-rate craftsman of no proven independence, with no spark of originality. Imagine yourself to be a young, ambitious creator offered that prospect. Would you sign up? I know I wouldn't. Yes, we need talented artisans who have a home in tradition, but we also need artists who will found their own practices and become new vital traditionalists. Before I outline some of the routes to improving the situation in the arts, I will give you an example of what we can achieve. This July, this year, a group of artists including Fen de Villiers, Matthew Fall Mackenzie, Ferro and me organised an exhibition in central London. Here you see some of the images of the installation. We booked the space, curated the display, transported art from around Britain, Europe and America, publicised it, hung the show and invigilated it. A website was set up. It was one that provided information, published our statement of principles and showed the art and allowed online sales. Here's a view of the website. You'll see that the styles of art include the Baroque, Symbolist, arts and crafts, early modernism and contemporary. It was not conceived to be varied, but rather an honest showcase of these artists' most representative works. Most of you would have been able to find at least a few pieces to your taste. A reasonable number of artworks sold. However, it could only take place due to the financial commitment of the participants. To build a collector base, we need more regular exhibitions that will sustain people's interest and reassure potential purchasers that the younger artists are serious and likely to stick around. Overall, the exhibition was successful. It showed that we have sufficient talent to fill an exhibition space. In fact, we had many more artists and more art than this small display could hold. We could mount an exhibition with double the number of participants and treble the work annually without the quality measurably decreasing. The first opening night was for press and business contacts, and that was very useful. The second one was for friends and family and was packed and very lively. I know that some of you came and enjoyed the event yourself, and thank you for your support. That made it a really exciting event. We were packed out, standing out on the street, lots of people drinking and smoking. So it became a social event for like-minded people, whether or not they were buyers or even fans of art. The exhibition had enough draw to attract people who are not in our circles due to the quality of the work and the centrality of the venue. Visitors could have an enjoyable visit and buy art without making any political commitment or even being aware of the common beliefs of the artists. In short, we can make exhibitions of the highest quality that are social events, but we need the assistance of various types to make this a regular. With sufficient contacts, funds and goodwill, we could hold such exhibitions anywhere in the country. Here are 6 routes to assist the arts. This excludes publishing and supporting print outlets, which I've already mentioned. 1, selling outlets. We need websites, agents and gallerists willing to take on, promote and sell art by counter-elite artists. This does not have to be art of an overtly political nature. Sellers can simply promote the art they like by artists they respect and sell it as it is, good art that people will want to possess and cherish. At the moment, there are no art dealers that I consider sound, not one. Think of the opportunity for the first among us to take up the opportunity the way others have done in publishing and news networks to make them high profile, successful, popular and money-making. 2, patronage. Once there are buyers of counter-elite art, vendors will appear who are aware that there is a market. That means people must buy art in the first place. That art may not be large or expensive. You can buy a print for as little as £40. If everyone we know commits to spending just £100 per year on original art, then the market would be stimulated. If that market becomes vigorous, then these pictures bought out of love or loyalty will appreciate in value. All at once we would have the appearance of a secondary market, where art is traded between auctioneers, retailers and collectors. Money poisons art, but art does not get made, at least at a professional level, without money. It is unreasonable to think that artists should work for nothing without the prospect of even covering their costs of time and materials when you yourself would not work in that way. Even if it is just buying a print for £40 or commissioning an artist to paint a view of your garden for £150, you can do your part. Ultimately, the fate of great private collections may be in the public realm. Museums of really worthwhile art could be established to counteract the increasingly worthless and diluted collection at the Tate Gallery. So, for example, I've written on the Van den Berg collection in, I believe, Antwerp, which is a model. It was saved from the liberalist government, local government there, by forming a foundation. It was deliberately not passed down through descent to the city because they did not trust the politicians of the city. So it was passed down through a private trust and is administered in that way, and that is how it has retained its private character. It doesn't do loans, it doesn't buy new work, it simply stays as it was. A fate that some of you who love the Wallace collection, for example, might consider. We talk of parallel economies of commerce, which think about parallel economies of art, owned privately and run by private individuals or tightly controlled private trusts. These could gather together the best art of today and become cultural treasuries. The work at the moment, of course, is quite cheap, relatively speaking. 3, sponsorship and advertising. As the arts of the counter-elite gain traction, so they will become suitable for commercial backing. If the circulation of periodicals reaches healthy levels, they should attract advertisers. Exhibitions could appeal to counter-cultural sponsors. Imagine an open exhibition that has cash prizes sponsored by companies and individuals ideologically aligned with organisers and participants. Think of how such prizes could incentivise young artists to hone their craft and create more ambitious art. It would make annual exhibitions social fixtures in our calendars as well as in the art world. We could encourage and reward genuine merit and give heart to artists now currently resigned to obscurity. 4, forums for gathering and discussion. We have a problem in that we are dispersed. No two of the contributing artists to our London exhibition lived in the same city. Half of us do not live even in the same country. We miss having social hubs fixed in place, the salons, bars, cafes and clubs that played parts in the past artistic movements. Also the galleries as well, the commercial galleries. There is no virtual equivalent for actually meeting, but having a good website with a chat facility would be valuable. Only last week I was contacted by a young artist wishing to join our movement, but there was no general website to which I could direct him. Not, of course, that we want centralised cultural production, although we should be able to discriminate when it comes to collaborating or promoting art. This lack of basic infrastructure makes us look as potential allies, ineffectual or insincere, or incompetent even. This is something that we artists should sort out ourselves, and I only mention it as an aside. One of us, among us, a noted speaker for later, talks about the organised minority, and at the moment we are the disorganised minority. We have the advantage, structurally speaking, of saying we are a minority, but a disorganised minority is of no value or power at all. We need to become an organised minority. Unfortunately, organising artists is like trying to herd cats, sadly. And I don't claim to be any expert. I don't claim to be an expert in organisation. An enterprising owner or manager of a venue could encourage art students to gather by offering discounts or an opportunity to exhibit work on the walls. Providing spaces for students to gather and form bonds, perhaps lifelong ones, will allow young artists to escape the oppressive orthodoxy, which is common at universities. But perhaps the conventional path to becoming an artist through university is coming to an end. Number 5, education and training. Small art schools should be set up to cater for students wishing to learn crafts that they cannot be taught by current university departments. The university departments have been deliberately de-skilled so that even if you wanted to find a tutor at your university who could teach you, very often they delegate this work to companies, to artisans, to specialist craft makers, so they don't actually make their own work. So they can't actually tell you how to make these things. Very often, I remember as a student, you spend more time talking to technicians, workshop technicians, and to the manager of the art store in the college than you do to your tutors, and it's often more informative. So these could be these art schools that I recommend we set up. These could be old style art schools, or they could be apprenticeships with established artists. These could be made more financially viable by organisers running auxiliary courses of instruction or weekly drop-in sessions of life drawing. These activities are profitable. They build they build relationships between an organisation and its local community. They support people to make art of a traditional character. If we have social spaces, art schools, community projects on our own terms, not overseen by local government, we will have the grounding for open exhibitions, prizes and student scholarships. This pragmatic approach is localism in action. Independence from central funding authorities, local government control and national government influence is essential to establishing resilient networks that reflect our aims. These schools could invite artists to give talks or lead courses, allowing artists the opportunities that are denied to them by university art departments. I should add a word of caution here. Some of you are well versed in legal matters, and I'm sure you can see an avenue for hostile actors to submit entrance applications to such organisations in order to subvert and control them. All it takes is for an arts organisation to refuse to allow an activist to join for a process of lawfare to be initiated against that organisation. Such action allows a legal team to cripple an organisation with monetary compensation or by forcibly opening it to all comers. Such organisations would have to be legally and financially compliant whilst also retaining privacy and upholding non-negotiable in-group values. Consult your local legal advisor on this. 6, foundations. Finally, there is space for charitable foundations to be established, which will stage exhibitions and publish books. They could also award prizes and stipends directly to artists. They could fund student scholarships at trusted art schools. An important role would be to reward young artists, especially students, by offering an alternative to unavailable opportunities in the mainstream. Foundation endorsements could act as a means for directing non-progressive collectors to find artists they wish to patronise. In some countries, such charitable giving is tax deductible, incentivising rich individuals and companies to make their giving tax efficient. In conclusion, forgive me if this seems to be an awfully long list for wishes of action for others to take, with me as a practising artist, one of the potential beneficiaries. However, it seemed ridiculous to come to you with false bashfulness and beat around the bush regarding the situation in the arts as I see it, both as a critic and as a practising artist. I welcome any questions you might have, which I'm sure will be as forthright as my outline has been. Thank you.